Our lead performer today is Professor Timaree Hagenburger. She's the nutrition professor. She's an author, an innovator, and a very, very accomplished speaker. She's a nutritionist, a dietitian, and a culinary wizard who performs in engaging TV as well as radio shows. As you can see from her slide, she's done lots of work in this field. She's really a performer, as you'll see, and she has actually come and performed live at some of our live events when we did them at ICC. In addition to being a registered dietitian, she's a full-time nutrition professor. She has a bachelor's in nutrition science from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and a master's degree in public health from UCLA. She has spoken at some of the most reputable corporate wellness programs, and she's a certified exercise physiologist as well from the ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine. She has regular segments on several TV shows and writes monthly columns for several newspapers and has been on many, many podcasts. She has a very resource-rich website, which is www.thenutritionprofessor.com, and is also the author of a cookbook titled The Foodie Bar Way, One Meal, Lots of Options, Everyone's Happy. She cherishes opportunities to connect and share her knowledge and passion for food, cooking, and physical activity and good health. And one thing that I love about her is that she's always smiling. And whenever you talk to her, she's constantly smiling and radiating that positive energy. And her style is marked by a blend of fun and practicality. And we're going to be talking. She said this is informal. We have lots to learn from her, and she'll be actually doing a show and tell today for us so that we can put this into practice in our own kitchen. Our other panelists are Gayatri Shanbag. She's the co-founder of the Nutritional Medicine and Ayurveda Center at San Jose on Santana Row. She's a nutritionist and a dietitian and trainer, as well as Veena Uttarwar, who's been one of our champions and has been a constant fixture at almost all of our events. And she's a holistic nutritionist and a Crack the Wellness Code dietary practices project lead. So without further ado, let's start the program. I'd like to invite Dr. Timaree Hagenburger.
Hello, I am so excited to have an opportunity to be with you again. Some of you I have done sessions with at ICC in San Jose and some on Zoom. So today we have a really unique situation because we are going to basically plan one of the new micro learning initiatives, which is going to be more of a virtual camp, this food camp, but not a mini version. So today we're just going to get a taste of some of the ideas and strategies and tips. But what I'm really hoping for is that this is going to be an interactive session so that I can learn exactly what you'd like to see in the full-fledged offerings that Crack the Wellness Code is going to do in 2021. So I am absolutely honored to be able to be one of the 94 offerings that ICC has stepped up to present during this very tumultuous time in 2020. And I am so excited about what we have to look forward to. The app that's coming up, the new programs, it's just going to take it to the next level. So what I'd like you to have is pen and paper or pencil and paper so that you can put what you're learning into an action plan and then give us feedback. So I'm going to be asking with each section that we discuss what you'd like to learn, what you'd like to know, what more that we can include in the full-fledged program in 2021. You're not going to want to miss that at all. Now, the way that, since this is a mini camp, the way that I like to organize it is around a cooking demo because we have a certain amount of time, right? But I also will touch on these other areas and bring in some golden nuggets for you to take home. So what we're going to start with is a cauliflower. We're going to take the cauliflower and roast it. We're going to roast it with a couple other ingredients. And then we're going to make a very green, rich pesto. And then we're going to put everything together and add a couple more ingredients and have fun with a raw noodle. So I'm going to bring in several different cooking techniques. And also, as we discuss different ingredients, we'll touch on the ideas of accessing high quality ingredients, how to store them best, what to buy in bulk and what to buy in smaller quantities. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the cauliflower. And I was debating whether or not I should have prepared it ahead of time, but I waited because I really wanted you to see how I purchased it and be able to discuss that. And so I keep it, of course, in the refrigerator. But what I want you to see is how gigantic this cauliflower head is. Now, this is important when we talk about accessing good ingredients at a good price. Never buy cauliflower by the pound. You always want to buy it by the head, because some cauliflower are tiny and some are ginormous. And so you want the biggest, heaviest cauliflower, and you want to buy it by the head. Okay, so you may see prices that look really good, but then you see it's by the pound and you're going to end up spending a lot more. Now, one thing about cauliflower, I bought the organic cauliflower, so I'm going to take off the plastic. But one thing about cauliflower that people don't realize is that the leaves are absolutely edible. So some cauliflower, and if you've ever grown it, you'll see the leaves are huge, and you think, oh my gosh, am I growing leaves or am I growing cauliflower? And then inside you'll see a little head, depending on how much, how big the plant is, and it just seems like the leaves are a waste. No, the leaves are amazing. I stir fry the leaves, steam them. I use them all the time. So make sure that you're not wasting any of the cauliflower. Now, a couple of things about preparing. I did not wash this ahead. Obviously, I kept it wrapped up. With some vegetables, most vegetables and fruits, you don't want to wash them ahead of time and have them sit in the refrigerator for several days. You want to think, wash right before you prep, because that extra water can invite more breakdown and you can end up with mold, and it'll just go bad fast. So what I'm going to do now is rinse it. And so I want you to think about questions that you have, but I'm going to go rinse it. And then I'll tell you as well, when you notice on cauliflower, there are brown spots, that's actually just oxidation. So that's just the air and light that has made that oxidize. So similar to if you sliced an apple and you would see it start to brown. So there's nothing wrong with that. If though you see it soft or black or even kind of like gel, then you know that has gone bad. But if it's just browning or kind of rusting, what we say, that's not bad. You can cut that off easily, shave it off with a knife, but it won't hurt you. So I'm going to go rinse this, and then I will be right back. Now, what I was going to show you as well, which I can use later, is everybody needs, so I'm going to throw in ideas about equipment, and that wasn't part of the takeaways that we promised, but they're definitely things that I will drop in. So everybody needs one of these over-the-counter strainers so that you can easily rinse produce and let it sit above the bottom of the sink. So these are very accessible. This one I got at IKEA for, I think it was under $8. So I'll use that a little later. So whenever you're cutting cauliflower, you're going to want to put it on upside down. So you're going to want to look at the cut side. And I took off some of the leaves over in the sink that were large, but this cauliflower just happens to be a huge one with not many leaves, which is wonderful. It doesn't matter to me either way, because if I'm looking for florets, I want a big, lots of the cauliflower itself. But if I just want good nutrition, leaves are fine too. Now, something that it prompted me to think about was, as I was cutting off those pieces of the leaves, it makes me think about 2 bowls. You should always have a garbage bowl. So garbage meaning actually like a compost bowl. And then if you're not close to a garbage can for plastic and things like that to recycle, then you can have another bowl for that. You want to minimize having to walk around the kitchen or crowding your cutting space. Many people crowd their cutting space, and then it makes for a mess and kind of just not settled when you're cooking. So you always want a compost bowl, and then I want a bowl for the leaves, and then I'm gonna want another bowl for my cut cauliflower. Now, a word about bowls. My husband, when I was buying some bowls at a restaurant supply, my husband said, "Why do you need a bowl that big?" And I said, "Oh, you always want a bigger bowl. You don't necessarily, it's always better to use a bigger bowl than a smaller bowl." So here is an example of a big bowl. And this is a catering size bowl, yet I use it every single week. I do my crazy salad prep, and you can find that in my cookbook as well as on my website. Okay, so now when you cut the cauliflower, you're gonna want, again, to cut from the stem side down, and you don't wanna cut through it, or else you're gonna have small pieces that are gonna be uneven. We are looking for florets. So we can basically break them apart, and you will always wanna cut from the stem, okay? So I'm actually going to I need a nice big bowl for my cauliflower. Okay. So see, it's getting busy in here already. Okay, so yes, I'm wanting to cut the florets so that we have nice, edible, great size pieces. Now, because I'm not concerned about that oxidation, I'm not going to really cut any of it off. What I'm going to be going for is bite-sized pieces, and we're going to be roasting it. So this is a huge cauliflower, and one of the tricks with food prep is to cook more than you need for the specific meal. So I don't think, though, with time this morning, that I'm going to end up using all of this cauliflower. But when I do this at home, I am home, but when I do this at home without being on Zoom, then I would prep all of this cauliflower, and I would roast it all or steam some and roast some, depending on what I wanted to do with it. Okay, so let me just cut a little bit more, and then we will get this sitting. Now, I had promised that I would talk about nutrient absorption. So cauliflower is a cruciferous vegetable, and that is part of the brassica family. And those happen along with broccoli and cabbage. Those happen to be very anti-cancer vegetables. However, one of the caveats is that the anti-cancer compounds benefit from cell wall destruction and time. So what that means is by cutting up this cauliflower and letting it sit, ideally you'd let it sit for a little while, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and then expose it to heat. Okay, so again, this is for the magic of Zoom and the magic of TV. We're not going to let it sit for that long, but that would be something to write down on your paper, on your notes page, is that the cruciferous vegetables benefit from having what we call the hack and hold. So letting it sit after you've chopped it. Now our next vegetable that we're going to use will also benefit from that. So I think maybe I'll do one more piece of cauliflower. I was so thrilled to see this gigantic cauliflower yesterday when I went shopping, because I wanted to wait to get it as fresh as possible. And when I saw this gigantic one, I just lit up. I know the produce people think, there she is again, getting excited. So I still have more than what many cauliflower by itself, but I still have a whole, oh my gosh, I know. It's amazing how much cauliflower was in that. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is put this cauliflower on a baking pan, so sheet pans. So we have a couple options. We have silicone mat on top, or we have parchment paper. So here is something to take notes about. This is, in my mind, the best parchment paper that I've used is the Costco Kirkland brand. Not only is it the most reasonably priced, but it's very high quality. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is because not only does nothing stick, but it also can be used over and over again. So I don't want to just use a piece for something and then have to throw it away unless it has a lot of sauce or something like that on it. But this parchment paper is excellent. And I use commercial parchment paper when I teach my hands-on cooking classes at my college. And that is horrible. And that's commercial. And it's thin and I don't like it at all. This is my preference. So we can use either the parchment paper or the Silpat. So I'll show you. I'm going to use the parchment paper. I do not use the sprays, the spray oil. I don't know if you've noticed that if you do use the spray oil, it absolutely ruins your pans and you can never get it off. And it makes me think, if it's what's happening to the pans, what is happening to my body if I'm putting that in my body? Just not interested in that. So the parchment is great. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, first I'm gonna take this cauliflower and I wanna season it. So in the full presentation or course offering that's part of the micro learning initiatives that we're gonna do in 2021, that full food camp, I'll talk about how I make this, but this is an aquafaba from the bean, cooking beans. And so I'm going to use that as my liquid. It's actually infused with garlic and onion. And then instead of any type of oil. So now I'm adding a no salt. You should definitely have a no salt seasoning blend. This is a great one. Again, from Costco. It's just very reasonable. It's organic, and it has 21 different herbs and spices. And so we're gonna use that. This is a great tip to have available. It actually works very well in place of broth, like a vegetable broth, adding water to that, and it has a little spiciness to it. So that's nice. So I'm gonna mix up our wonderful cauliflower with that seasoning. And I'm gonna let this sit for just a minute while I speak to you about the other vegetable that needs to be crushed and then sit, okay? So let me get this cleaned off. I like to have questions throughout, so this is, I hope you're writing things down because I want to be able to interact with you. I feel like I'm by myself, but I know I am not. Okay, so the vegetable that needs to sit is garlic, and garlic is one of the most potent anti-cancer vegetables that we can choose by far. So one thing, again, for storage, because that was something that we were going to talk about today. So garlic is best stored at room temperature in some kind of a clay pot. Okay, so like terracotta pot. I have seen people keep it in the refrigerator, and it seems like it just saps all of the flavor and moisture. So when you want to buy the garlic as hard as possible. So you really want to make sure, because as it ages, it softens as well as sprouts. If it's soft, I find it just starts to dry up as well. That's another sign that it's old. But with garlic, you want to always have a lot because it is very good for the body. And what we want to do is crush the head. So if you're using, when I was growing up, I'm Italian, and my grandmother, my nonna, would always make pasta sauce from scratch. And she would always cook the onion, and then she would press the garlic right into the pan, right into the soup pot or the sauce pot. But she didn't realize that when she did that, the anti-cancer compounds actually don't have an opportunity to form at the highest level. So what a better idea would have been to crush that garlic and let it sit, and then cook the onion and then add it. Okay, so I'm going to take a couple heads or a couple of cloves. So what I would normally do is, if I didn't want to use the cloves whole, which is what I would like to do, I would use a great garlic press and press it onto a plate or something that's easy, or a bowl, and then just let it sit. Okay, so since I want to actually have the garlic whole, I'm going to just crush it. So using a knife, and this just has cauliflower on it, which is fine. I'm going to just crush it with the palm of my hand. And not only does that allow for the skins to come right off, but it also crushes the cell walls. So we're going to have that into the cauliflower because I want that to be roasting at the same time. Now, one way that you can also allow the maximized anti-cancer compound with garlic is to combine the garlic that's cooked with fresh. So at the very end, when this all comes together, you're going to see that we used the roasted garlic and the fresh garlic. And you can roast it in its skins as well. So I'm just turning on my oven, which I probably should have a little while ago. Okay, So we have the onion and the garlic. And then the other thing that we're gonna work on roasting are gonna be tomatoes. So I have the honor, actually, of being able to, and the wonderful opportunity of being able to go outside and pick tomatoes. We turned our whole front yard into edible only. So we still have tomatoes that are growing. They're not quite as red as they were in the heat of the summer, but the flavor is excellent still. So I have a whole bunch of tomatoes that I keep on my counter, and that's something else about storing. And we're gonna add those to our roasted vegetables. And a few things about the tomatoes. First off, you should not keep them in the refrigerator. So that unless they're already sliced, if they're whole tomatoes, you want the maximum amount of flavor, and we find that on the counter. Second is that you don't want to take out the seeds and the water around the seeds. So often recipes will call for de-seeding a tomato, so cutting it in half and taking out the seeds. But we see that the seeds actually have anti-platelet, anti-coagulation properties, so they can help with heart disease prevention. So we don't want to get rid of those fabulous seeds. So I'm gonna leave these whole. I know they're gonna blister and they're gonna crack open, which is just fine with me. The flavors will intensify. And as you had asked about the garlic powder versus the fresh garlic, when we consume fresh tomatoes, there is some of a carotenoid called lycopene, which is again an anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory. But when we cook the tomato, the lycopene amount goes up. So we're going to take advantage of that while we're cooking, and the flavor intensifies. That's why something like a sun-dried tomato will be so much of a flavor just explosion, because of that concentration of the flavors through drying. And these are just fantastic. They're going to bring beautiful color too. So we're going to put those in. And this is where we could also add a little extra seasoning. So I love turmeric, and we're going to use that in a variety of ways. So this is just an organic turmeric powder. So I'm going to put some in here, and fresh turmeric we're going to use as well. And again, they'll have different properties. We want to use them both. And we're going to do a little black pepper. And you always want to make sure black pepper and turmeric together. That will maximize not only nutrient absorption for the anti-inflammatory power of turmeric, but it will keep it in our blood at higher amounts, because the liver tends to want to take it out of our blood. Okay, so we have this mixture of vegetables, and we're just going to put it right on the baking sheet. I might have a little extra liquid, so let me put these on. Now, cauliflower is also being used in the rice form. So you can find, and I'll show you in the freezer, I have some rice cauliflower that you can buy in the freezer section of your supermarket. And so in the future, I will do another recipe, and more than likely part of the full cooking camp, where we're using cauliflower in its riced form. But for this recipe, I don't want tiny pieces. I want actual florets. And that's why I'm using a fresh cauliflower. Okay, so I just have a little more to fit. And we want to make sure there's enough space for the cauliflower to brown. And because cauliflower can be eaten raw, we don't have to worry about a specific amount of time. We just will do it by preference of texture. So whenever you feel like that's perfect for me, then it's ready. I'm going to give it probably about 45 minutes or so. I will put it right next to the camera. So the next piece of the recipe is going to be a pesto. And I want to do a cilantro based pesto. And in my cookbook, The Foodie Bar Way, it explains how to make pestos with different ingredients. And so today I'm going to be using that concept of adding different important components, but changing up the flavor profile. So the pesto that we're going to make today that recipe is nowhere except in my head, that we're going to put it together right now. So after the presentation, I will, over the next few days, I'll put the recipe together on paper and be able to get it out to everyone. But I wanted to be able to show you that you don't have to have a recipe as long as you know which components fit together, and that you have some of those basic pantry type components all the time. So I am going to move this cauliflower. I'm going to put it back in the fridge. I don't need it right now. And I am going to move on to the pesto recipe. So my, let's see how to make this. Equipment. Oh, I need to mention this really quickly. One of the pieces of equipment besides the garbage bowl, right, that you want to make sure you have, and a good knife, is you want to have a good cutting board. So this is my favorite cutting board. And as you can see, it is very large. This cutting board is bamboo and it's from IKEA. So if you have access to an IKEA, which I know there's one in the Bay Area, this cutting board is only, I think right now it used to be $19 and I think it's $22 now. So this is a wonderful buy because it has the lip. It stays right on the edge of the counter. And I also have plastic cutting boards that are flexible that I can put through the dishwasher. So that's something you can put right on top of that cutting board if you want a smaller space to cut on. Glass cutting boards, dull knives. So you don't want to use a glass cutting board, okay? But these bamboo cutting boards are excellent. Okay, so that is a little piece of equipment in there, but it's important because that's, if you have a nice space and it's organized, and you have enough space and it's organized, it makes all the difference in the mindset of prepping. I've seen people use little tiny cutting boards and they have everything. Oh, it's just so crowded and frustrating. And you don't want that. You want it to be relaxing because you're preparing food that is going to nourish your body. And we want very positive energy going into that. Now I want to talk about the pesto. I'm plugged, my food processor's plugged in. So this is as far as I can pull it. But what I'm going to do is start putting ingredients into the food processor. Now, food processors are going to be ideal when we want a texture that isn't soupy. So when you can use a blender, but you definitely need liquid in there, where The food processor could be used to chop garlic, to chop onions. And then you have no worries about the fingers, right? And smelling at all. You can just drop them in there and let that pulse, right? But it's great for making salsas and anything where you don't necessarily want a lot of water and you want some texture. So because I like pestos to be a little, to have some texture, I'm going to use the food processor. And the food processor is really easy to clean. You can really get all of the wonderful product out, where sometimes blenders are a little more difficult, although blenders have their place in the kitchen as well. So for this pesto, while most pestos are basil based, you kind of think about pesto as like a basil pesto. This one is cilantro based. So I know how wonderful cilantro tastes, and I know some people are not as big of a fan, but when I have enjoyed Indian food, I love the cilantro flavor, and Mexican food, I just love cilantro. Now, what you're seeing here is I cleaned the cilantro and wrapped it in a clean dish towel. And this will keep it. So last night when I brought it home, this is organic cilantro. When I brought it home from the grocery store, I had it soaking in actually this bowl. So this is the bowl for the salad spinner. So I had ice water in here, and then I had it soaking. That way any kind of silt or dirt goes to the bottom. Then I took off just the bottom stems and put them into this basket. And then I could remove all the water, or a great majority of water. Salad spinners are excellent. Then I transferred it to the clean dish towel. And now it is just, you can see how fresh and beautiful. It's not wilted. It's just gorgeous. Now this recipe that I'm imagining is going to have, I'm going to do maybe a double, I think I want to do a double batch. So I am being very generous. This is 1 cup. And this was a lot of cilantro. Oh, it's so good. And cilantro and parsley, they all will help even to take the minerals, the heavy metals rather, out of your brain. So they will help chelate those. So you want to make sure you're always including lots of these fresh herbs. People don't think about herbs as green leafy vegetables, but they are. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I am just going to pack in a lot of cilantro in here. I'm going to add even a little bit more, and I still have plenty in here for me to add on top of my favorite dishes. So I'm going to roll this back up, and then I just have it in a bag that I will recycle here. Okay. So that's a major tip, to make sure your greens, to make them last if you need them quickly like that. Now let me show you another way that I keep greens, and that is like flowers. So these beautiful, look at this parsley. I just took it this morning from our front yard, just clipped it. So in that case, you can keep it in a vase, or this is just a glass jar, a canning jar. And then I also have purple basil from our front yard. So the basil was gorgeous all summer, and now we're getting to the point where the plant is kind of ending its cycle. But the purple means lots of antioxidant, lots of cancer fighting. You want the deep purple colors. So I'm going to make this a mixed green cilantro, but also mixed green pesto. So this is called Italian flat leaf parsley compared to the curly parsley. So you can see this. Sometimes people get this confused with cilantro. And even last night when I was at the grocery store, because I have cilantro growing, but it's not robust. And so I bought the cilantro at the grocery store. And there was a gentleman that was looking and looking. And I said, can I help you? And he said, I'm supposed to be getting flat leaf parsley. And so I showed him where it was. And he said, I always get it confused with the cilantro. And I said, well, both of them are excellent. But if your wife's asking for parsley and you bring home cilantro, she's not going to be happy because the flavor is very different. So this parsley, I'm just going to chop. It is so beautiful. I wish you were here. I don't think you can smell it, but I can. And it is good to use the stems. The stems have nutrition. So we put it all in there. Okay, you don't need to worry about that. And then I'm going to put some of this beautiful purple basil. So purple, you always want to look, what can you eat in your diet that's purple? Even last night they had purple cauliflower. It was pretty puny, it was little, and so I didn't want to get it. But anything that's purple is going to be wonderful, as long as it's the actual plant is purple, not purple dye. So we don't want that. But purple potatoes, when I do the full course, I'll spend some time talking about some of my favorite purple foods, including purple potatoes. Okay, so I'm getting some basil in here, but the majority of the flavor is going to be from the cilantro. One little extra tip, when you are growing basil, because like I said, we'll talk about that in the larger program. You want to cut off the flowering part. As it's growing, it will continue to grow more. If you let it flower, it seems to dampen the speed of growth. Okay, so we have some greens in there. Now, what I want to add to this, I want to add several ingredients. Okay. And okay, so we have all kinds of things here. This you don't need. So one of the primary liquid that I'm going to use is lemon. Now, Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R, are my favorite lemons. And those are a little bit sweet and they have a thinner skin. They're so juicy. They're just fantastic. They are by far my favorite lemon. And I have a friend who has a tree, and we have one in the front. It's just not producing a whole bunch yet because it's new. But when she gives me lemons, I will zest them, and I'll do that for us here. And then I put the juice into ice cube trays. And then I pop those ice cubes out and put them into a zip top bag. And then I have them when I don't have easy access to her lemons. And so I try to do that as much as possible so I have enough for the whole year. Sometimes I still need to buy them and we're growing our own, but that's a really good tip instead of letting the citrus go bad or feeling like you have to use it up all at once. Using the ice cube trays is excellent. Okay, now I will add, I'll go ahead and add the lemon, then I'll talk about some of these other ingredients. Now this lemon is already really juicy. I can feel it, and I've already rinsed it. but if you roll it and start to break down those cell walls, it will be even easier to get the juice out. Now, before you juice it, you always want to make sure you're microplaning. So this is how you take the very outside, just the very top. Okay, so you can see in here, you just want the very top of the skin. And if you've seen me talk about this before, it's because it helps to reduce our risk of skin cancer. It protects the skin of the fruit, and it protects our skin as well. But it also adds a really nice pungent lemon flavor. So we want to add that. Now, if you're using lime, it's a little more bitter. So you want to just be aware of how much you're using if that's going to change the profile, okay, the flavor profile. And then let's cut this lemon in half. And I always use a little bowl to juice the lemon because I don't want to have to pick out the seeds in the food processor. Lemon seeds are fine. They won't hurt you. Apple seeds we don't want to consume, but lemon seeds are okay. But again, they add kind of a bitterness. So I don't necessarily want those in our pesto. So my favorite way to get juice out is a reamer. This is very low tech, but I find it the best. I have had those large citrus squeezers, but I've broken every one I have because I'm so squeezing it so hard to get all the juice out that I end up breaking it. So I don't know. It frustrates me. So this works very, very well. Okay, so we need a couple, actually we need several tablespoons. So I'm gonna go ahead. I like to get about 1/4 of a cup of juice. So I'm gonna go ahead and just juice the whole lemon. And I see quite a few seeds coming out. So I'll pick those out with a fork and then we'll be ready. And an interesting tip is if you have the citrus, the peels, putting those in your garbage disposal is a good idea to help clean the garbage disposal. So run it with the citrus peels and it can help clean the garbage disposal. So there's always lots of little tips that I want to share with you. Okay, so I'm going to take out these use my little garbage bowl, take out these seeds. Okay, so I'm going to start with, this was just about 1/4 of a cup, which is perfect. Okay, so we have the lemon juice. Now we're going to add some ginger. We love ginger, don't we? Yes. Okay, so ginger is another item that you saw me pull out of the freezer. So I rinsed them before I froze them, but this is a huge hack. I love doing ginger from the freezer because it doesn't get stringy. So you can easily grate the ginger with the microplane, comes out beautiful, and it doesn't mold in the freezer. When I buy ginger and keep it in the refrigerator, it has a tendency to shrivel up and mold. And I don't want to throw any ginger away. I love ginger.
It's a good spice.
It's wonderful, yes. So much flavor, but also very anti-inflammatory, very anti-cancer. These, not only is it the color that we love, right? The color is the phytonutrients, but the flavor, the gingerols, that's actually the compounds that make ginger smell like ginger. They are health promoting. So you can see here, I have beautiful ginger, okay, in here. And the microplane, you cannot get hurt by using the inside, touching the inside with the finger. And the outside, if you go up, does not hurt. It's just going this way, I guess. So down is going to be safe. It's just this is the way that you would cut. Okay, so I've had people that say, oh, I'm afraid to use this. I don't want to get hurt. But it can't hurt you unless you try to grate yourself on there. Now, something else that looks just like ginger, which you know very well, is turmeric. So we also want some raw, fresh turmeric. And it has the beautiful color. I keep it in the freezer as well, so that it's ready when I am. So it's a great addition to the top of salad as well. So I want that in there. I'm going to put this back in the freezer. Now, zucchini. So we're going to use zucchini in two different ways today. One way is in the pesto itself. So with the zucchini, this is also called summer squash. And when you buy it, smaller is better because it'll be more sweet and flavorful. The larger it gets, the bigger the seeds, the more bitter. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with accessing and sourcing was the environmental impact. So this is from a different store. So the zucchini is wrapped in plastic with a paper cardboard tray. Now, some have plastic trays, some have a lot of packaging associated. So one of the decisions that you need to make when it comes to accessing your food is how much packaging is involved. So if this is too much packaging, which it's a lot more than just the plain zucchini, then that's something that you vote for with your dollar, right? So now with zucchini, for sure, you do not want to rinse it until you are ready to use it, because it is very susceptible to going bad and getting slimy if it has too much water. So I am going to we're going to use both of these packages. I bought this because I wanted to show you, but I'm going to rinse them right now, and then I'll come right back while you're thinking of other questions. I'll be right back. Okay, so I am going to take the zucchini that has the bend in it, and you'll learn why in a little bit, but I'm going to take that. I'm done with these. Let me just rearrange myself here. Okay. So I need about a cup, well, maybe 2 cups of zucchini to add to this pesto. So I have a cup measure in here. Another thing you want to make sure that you have very good equipment is knives. And very good doesn't mean very expensive. Again, this is actually a knife from IKEA that was, I believe, maybe $19. They have knives between $10 and $20 that are very good. You can spend thousands. It's amazing. Knives can be very, very expensive. Most chefs travel with their knives because it's so important to them. But we also don't have to have that high of an expense for knives. A lot of my students cannot afford that. So I wanted to always give options for other lower price, but good quality items. And so IKEA actually does a good job. There's this knife that we like with this handle, but there's also another that I'm going to show you as well. I like this handle, IKEA knife, and this is $10. This was, you're going to laugh at, I mean, I love citrus, so I use this all the time. So this is another one that I got locally, at like Target or Walmart, and it has a place to catch the seeds. It works okay. I really like the wooden one.
Oh, I like
And
that.
then this one is a cute little one. The same thing, I got it at a local store, and it includes a little container that measures the amount of juice.
Few people mentioned about the ginger peel. Do you use them? Do you?
Yes,
Know,
I use the ginger peel, edible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you wash them before you freeze the ginger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's an answer. So.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. I love your questions. Now I'm going to add to the pesto bean. We're going to do a white bean. So they're cooked white beans. Okay. Add a little bit more. Legumes of all types, beans, peas, lentils, fantastic food. You want to fit them into your diet as much as possible. I'm also adding mustard seed powder. Okay, this is very, very good to combine with any kind of the brassica family, right? The cruciferous vegetables, to increase, because this is actually a cruciferous vegetable, the mustard greens are, to increase the amount of those enzymes. So I'm just going to add a little bit to this pesto. I don't even want to taste it. Don't need to have the taste come through. So maybe half a teaspoon. But I was mentioning that I was going to show you how to keep these powders from getting from caking up. So I save these, do not eat, the little desiccant. So you keep those, like when my sesame seeds have one in there, or anything that has a food that has one in there, then I'll save it and put it in my ginger powder, my mustard powder, my onion powder, and garlic powder. And then it won't cake up. So that's a special tip. Okay, then I'm going to add some fat. So we want to use whole fat, whole food sources of fat. So I have olives, and that'll add some salt flavor. And I want to add walnuts. Walnuts, we always keep in the freezer. So last night I cracked up whole walnut shells, and the fresh walnuts are in here. When you have them in the shells, they can last longer outside of cold. But once you have them exposed, you want to make sure you keep them in the freezer. All the nuts stay in the freezer to make them last longer. So I'm just going to add a little bit, just a few tablespoons of walnuts. And I'm going to add maybe 6 olives. Throw everything up on the sides and not continue to mix. But since, what we didn't add was garlic. We need to add some garlic. Now I'm going to add fresh garlic to this. It's not going to be cooked. So because I have the fresh garlic and the roasted garlic, that will make that roasted garlic even more powerful than it would have been because it was heated. Okay, so I'm going to add the fresh garlic here. Now, I'm going to, because I didn't crush it, ahead of time. And there's lemon juice in the pesto. I'm gonna go ahead and crush it with the garlic press. You can mince it as well. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to use a press, but I'm gonna do that. And I'm gonna let it sit for a few minutes while I move on to the last piece of the recipe. And then we can add the garlic in to the pesto and then start to assemble it. Okay, the last piece of this recipe is the noodles. So this is going to be a zoodle recipe. So zoodles, if you're not familiar, are zucchini noodles. And my father is 100% Italian. His mom and dad were both born in Italy. And so he grew up his whole life with pasta, 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 pasta. And so I showed him what zucchini noodles could taste like, and he was hooked. I couldn't believe it. I didn't think he was going to go for it because he's grown up with pasta. But the way that I prepared it, he loved the texture. So that's what I'm going to show you about doing right now. Now, you can make noodles from zucchini with a variety of items. So the simplest is a peeler. And this is basically the only time my peeler gets used because I don't like to peel the skin because I try to buy as much organic as possible. And there's so many nutrients in the skin of everything, the skin of carrots, the skin of cucumbers, just the skin of everything. So I don't use my peeler very much. But you can use it to make noodles. They're pretty flat though in their texture. Another option, actually there are two here, are spiralizers. So this is simply a little gadget that you turn the zucchini right into and the noodles come out the side. Okay, very inexpensive. You can pick that up again at a Target or a big store, right? Like a Walmart or something. This one is one that I really love. This is a spiralizer that I'll show you how it works. So we put in the zucchini, we decide how thick we want the noodles. There's a little little knob down there. And then we put that in there, try to make it as even as possible. And then we're just gonna turn. And I'll show you how these noodles come out the bottom. Some food processors will have attachments that do this. You can purchase, you'll see. So look how beautiful these noodles came out. Well, and the other thing is if you buy it outside, if you buy it at the grocery store, then the zucchini is going to go bad very quickly. So it's very common to have it mushy. Now, speaking of mushy, this is the #1 mistake people make with zucchini noodles is they cook them. Do not cook zucchini noodles. Put the sauce that you want on the zucchini or the hot vegetables and let that heat come into the zucchini noodles. If you cook them, it will get soft almost immediately. And that's where people have been disappointed with using zucchini noodles. If they try to cook it, it just turns into mush, which if that happens, make it into a soup. Puree it. Don't serve people mushy noodles, okay? Please, no mushy zoodles. So that's for that one, but I'm gonna keep going and I wanna make some more I'm going to use at least one more of these zucchinis. Okay. This just goes on the bottom. But it's so fast. Often my students will say, oh, I go to fast food because it takes so long to cook. And even boiling pasta doesn't take long, but nothing, getting down there, nothing is as quick as this. I mean, think you can't boil water. This just takes a few seconds and you have beautiful noodles. And you can also, any kind of sauce will work for this. I think I'm going to do this other half. And then we'll be done with the noodles. And you can do other vegetables. The zucchini is just excellent because it's so mild. Now, as you could imagine, you want straight zucchini, right? You don't want it crooked. And that's why I use the crooked one in the pesto. So this is an example of 2 ways to use one vegetable. Okay, these beautiful noodles. Yes, you do not want to waste money buying these out. You just buy the zucchini and make your own noodles. And I'll show them to you. Look at this beautiful bowl. Look how many noodles are in here. And we're talking about probably, oh my gosh, 25 calories maybe, compared to this much pasta would be likely 400 probably calories easily. So the zucchini is fantastic and it's fresh, and it's even, there's even omega-3 in the skin of the zucchini. It's just incredible. Okay, now we've let that garlic sit. So I want to put it into the pesto now. And roasted garlic's going to give us a different flavor. So if you want it more mild, then you can put a little tiny bit of the fresh and more of the roasted. That'll be much sweeter option and less strong. So I'm actually going to scrape the sides a little bit more. And then we'll whir this up, let it get a little smoother, and then I'll be right back with you. Now, I wish that you could smell this. It is just gorgeous color. We want that bright green. Ah, smells so good. There's actually a really nice balance of flavors or of smells of the cilantro, but it's not overpowering. I am going to do a little taste and see if we have the Ooh, that's very good. The zucchini just makes it mild. It definitely is not overpowering cilantro at all. You could add more. Definitely add more.
You added mustard also, right?
I added a little, but you would never taste it. It's just in there. A lot of times people are a little hesitant to do pesto because it's so strong. But this would be a great pesto to get someone started on. And then you could amp up even stronger and stronger. But oh, this came out great. Okay, good. This is a keeper recipe.
Hey, we are just watching, you know, we would like to eat now.
I know, I want to be able to give it to you. Let me check the vegetables in the oven. Woo, they are toasty. Okay. So I did 375. And you can see there's some that are very brown. Some are just golden. Let me show you. I have the spoon. So because I'm not using any animal products, I don't have the contamination, right? So this spoon we used to mix up the seasoning with the cauliflower. But if it had raw juice on it for some kind of animal product, we wouldn't want to use it. But it makes it very simple when it's all plant-based. But I want you to see, can you see how beautiful that cauliflower is?
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yay! And it smells so good. Again, I am sorry that you cannot smell the wonder that this food is. But what I'm going to do now is show you how to put it all together. And then I'm going to give you something to think about and an action item for each of the areas that we talked about for this mini camp, because I realize our time is moving, but I'm also happy that I was able to answer questions along the way. So I am adding in some of these vegetables. So I have some gorgeous garlic, right, that roasted. Here, I'm going to move this over to the other side of the counter. And then now we're going to add in the pesto. So the fresh, hot, not fresh, but the vegetables, we just fresh out of the oven. And then we're going to add the pesto. Again, we don't want to cook the zucchini noodles. So I'm just going to take generous scoop of the pesto. Now, I obviously have much more pesto than I'm using right now. And I am going to show you after what you can do with that wonderful pesto. Okay, so we want to mix this up. Now, if you wanted a little extra moisture, that would be great to add the lemon juice. If you want to add a little extra lemon juice. But this, and you know what we're missing? We need another legume. We want to have as many beans and peas and lentils as possible. So I want to add another color to this gorgeous combination. So what I'm going to add, see here, kidney beans. So we're going to add some kidney beans. And I'll also, in the main, when we do our big presentation, I want to talk about sprouting beans, because I have some sprouted beans to add that I could add as well. But that's kind of the next level, right? And then one thing that I think this needs is purple. I know you guys think, oh my goodness, she's adding too many things. No, purple cabbage. So I want to add, and I rinse this, I want to add a little bit of sliced fresh cabbage to the top. So I'm going to do I want very thin pieces.
Timaree, I am going to ask you some questions along the way, if that's okay.
Yes.
So one of the question is, should we soak the cauliflower in salted water to get bugs instead of rinsing it? Your thoughts?
Yes, we already answered that one.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a beautiful, let's see here. Take some of these noodles. Some of these noodles are so long. It's incredible. Okay, they're going all over. Okay, make sure we have some good amount of cauliflower and the kidney beans. Okay. All right, and I want this on top. Okay, let me clean the edge so it looks beautiful. And I'm also getting into sprouts. So we're gonna talk all about sprouts in our main offering. Okay, so can you see this beautiful dish? Now, you had asked me where I get some of my utensils. So I had mentioned IKEA as one place where I get cutting board, this strainer, the knives, and then other places, like I had mentioned about the citrus reamer, that's basically where I go. Sometimes the one spreader or scraper that I love is named Tovolo, Tovolo, and I get that online. The citrus or this I got at Costco, but Target, Walmart, any of those, the salad spinner, that's basically where I go for most of what I have. And then I wanted to mention when I was out, and I think this might have even been a grocery outlet, but I found ice cube trays. These are large and they have the silicone bottom to be able to easily push them out. This is what I'm going to use for the extra pesto. I'm going to freeze it, and then just like I did with the ice cube tray, with the lemon juice, I'm going to have pesto cubes. And then I have that pesto to thaw out in the amounts that I would like, because I often will use this as an addition to another type of sauce or another dish. So I may have a tomato-based sauce that I add a cube of pesto to, or if I'm making a small amount for myself, then I'll just use 1 cube, and it keeps it very, very well in the freezer for several months. So these are very helpful to have. Okay, so one of the questions or one of the areas that we were talking about was accessing food. So we did just talk about that quite a bit. One of the questions that I want you to think about, and this is a kind of a take-home point, is when you're deciding whether you go to a local grocery store for something, or a bulk store like a Costco, or an Indian spice store. So I go to local Indian spice store for like my red split lentils, and some different legumes. One of the questions that I want you to think about is how fresh is their produce? So you can buy certain things at different places, right? So you want to think about how fresh is the produce? How close is it to me? Because we want to make sure that we're not using a lot of gas to drive all over, right? The least packaging, right, as possible. And then when we go to a lot of the bulk stores, then we want to make sure we're not just buying a large quantity just because it's a good price. One thing is you have to make sure it is a good price, but the other is that you don't want to buy something to just throw away. And as we talked about, like with the ginger, if you're going to buy a large amount, you have to have a plan for that. One plan could be to share it with someone else, to go in together and split, the amount and then share it. That's definitely one thing to think about. So when you think about the stores that you frequent often, I would like an action item for you, which goes into the next area, to create a master list, a master shopping list. And there you can make it as simple as a sheet of paper that you have on the inside door of your pantry, or that you can take a picture of before you take off and go to the grocery store. Or you can use an app. One of the suggestions that I have, and I'll have more for you in the big class, but one of the suggestions that I have is the reminders, the notes app. If you have an iPhone, just the notes app or the Android has a similar app, will allow you to have check marks, and it will allow you to add pictures. So if you're sending someone else to the grocery store and you want to make sure they get cilantro and not cabbage or not parsley, then you can include a picture, which makes it very, very fun. And you can have a shopping list for each place. So before the end of the weekend, I would like you to come up with at least one master shopping list. So for one of the stores that you go to, so that you don't have that idea of every time what do we get there? Oh, and then you get home and you forget. Because especially with the COVID right now, we want to make sure we're going as infrequently as possible and we're doing it as quickly as possible. So we want to be very organized with that. So you want to have your shopping list organized by area of the grocery store so that you can get in, get your work done, and get out. Okay. So that's very important with those shopping lists. And when you have the master, you're always adding and making adjustments. So it's called a smart list, because it gets smarter as you get smarter, because you're making those changes. And then the last piece that I want to make sure we talk about just for a minute is the eating habits. And there are people who spend a lot of money making sure the food is the highest quality. But if they're not eating it with a mindful intention and slowly and in the rest and digest mode of our central nervous system, they're not going to be able to absorb the same amount of nutrients. So I want you to use something extremely powerful, and that is the power of the pause. And I want you to make sure that when you start a meal, this is a very important piece, that you take 3 nice, relaxing breaths before that meal. And then at some point during that meal, you do this again, and you take 3 cleansing, relaxing, renewing breaths during that meal, because that tells your brain to be in the rest and digest instead of fight or flight. And we know that our brain talks to our lungs, but we also know now that our lungs speak to our brain, and that you have a network of stretch receptors in your lung tissue that when you slow your breathing down, it sends the message in the brain to say, we're okay, we're not in danger. We can relax and focus on nutrient absorption. So there will be a lot more that we talk about. I am so excited about these learning, micro learning initiatives. CWC and ICC are just on the cutting edge, and I am absolutely honored to be part of it. So I'm happy to stay on for a few extra moments to answer more questions. And again, what we really want is feedback about what more you want to learn, not necessarily just to answer all the questions today. We want to hear so that we can build the best program going forward in 2021.
So Timaree, I will just summarize a couple of questions into a nugget. So
Perfect.
the questions are about cooking oil, about how to balance protein intake, and also how to wash and clean the vegetables if the washing is not a good idea, and how to store them into COVID times. And one question is different, is about iodine supplements taste usually bad. So how to make sure you get 150 mcg per day. Any recommendation? So that's pretty much the questions can be.
Okay, that's a lot of different questions. So let me go through quickly one at a time. So one of the questions, and Sachin, you help me to make sure I get all of the questions. So one of the questions was washing the vegetables. So we definitely want to rinse the vegetables. You can do it in the salt water that was brought up. You can do it in a vinegar, a diluted vinegar mixture, or you can, yeah, those are actually the best options because the produce washes don't show that they're really very effective and they're worth the money. So the least expensive would be the salt water, but you just want to make sure you're rinsing it off. But like I had mentioned in the beginning, you don't want to wash all of those vegetables when you get home from the grocery store and then hope they last all the week. That won't work. So you want to do the right before. For most of them, you want to prepare, you want to wash them right before you prep. But yes, it's important. Now, animal products, different. It's actually recommended not to rinse poultry or meat or any of that because of the splatter. It's so dangerous to have the splatter that that's dangerous. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so that was that question. The iodine supplement question. As far as the taste, I can't help you in that with the taste. But what you can do in place of it is to do sea vegetables. If you are someone who doesn't mind that taste, that it's definitely sea taste. But with the dulse, it's a very small amount. It's like 1/8 of a teaspoon or 1/16 of a teaspoon. It's a very small amount. And the nori sheets would be like 1 sheet, during the day. So the iodine is not an issue unless you are low in it, but there's just a lot of people who don't get as much as they think, especially if they're avoiding salt. If you are going to use sea salt, you can get iodized sea salt. So that would be an option too, but a lot of people are using the sea salts, but they're not iodized. So you just want to, there's no iodine in there. So you want to make sure. And then you had, tell me
question
another
on
question.
protein and then the cooking oil.
Cooking, okay, let's do cooking oil first. So I don't use oils because the research shows that at least for patients who have heart disease, and because the majority of people in the US have some level of heart disease just because of the way we ate growing up, even by 10 years old, most people eating the standard American diet have some evidence in their blood vessels of the beginnings of heart disease. Then I use whole food sources of the fats because the fat is very important, but it's just in an oil. It's been extracted and it doesn't have the fiber. It doesn't have the phytonutrients. And this also can answer a question that you didn't ask, but that may be related, which is juicing versus something like smoothie. So we used to think that the fiber that you lost in juicing was just that roughage, just fiber, kind of like a brush through your intestine. But now we know that up to 70% of the phytonutrients are attached to the fiber, and only the bacteria in our large intestine can cleave it. So we want to try to have the fiber intact. So if you think about adding olives to my pesto versus olive oil, I get so much of the nutrients. Actually, it takes 44 olives to make 1 tablespoon of olive oil.
Right.
So it is not a whole food. And what other as well happens is people add, they think they just add a little. A tablespoon is over 100 calories, typically about 120 calories. So we also know that it takes very little work to go from your lips to your hips when it comes to fat. So we want to eliminate those quick absorbing sources. So that's one of the reasons why the oil is not is not optimal. And I talked about this when I went to ICC in person, is that ghee, because it's heated, has oxidized cholesterol, and that can be very damaging to the blood vessels and the brain. So that's why we go with the whole food sources. And then your last question was about balancing protein. And a lot of people, when they come into my classes, my college classes, they come in with ideas, they call them the macros: how much carbohydrate, how much lipid, how much protein. And that often comes from the gym. They work out, and these plans that have them doing, 30, that kind of thing. But what we know is it's not necessarily the amount of the percentage that's important, it's the source. So when we think about, there's protein in all foods, except there's no protein in oil, there's no protein in sugar, right? But all whole foods, all vegetables, even fruit has protein in it. And it is possible not to get enough protein, but that typically only happens when you don't get enough calories, or it's all junk food. It's all processed chips and candy and French fries. So by making sure you include at least 1.5 cups of legumes, of cooked legumes a day, and I would recommend, 1/2 cup even per meal would make a good amount. Then you're going to cover your bases along with all of the other protein you're getting from the whole grains and the vegetables, and then a little bit from the fruits, and definitely from the nuts and seeds. You're going to get some protein as well. So we have been exposed to a very protein-centric, commercialized view of nutrition. But in part, that is because that's where a lot of money is. So there's not a lot of money in broccoli and zucchini and red lentils, but the money is in the high protein animal products. But that's also where the disease comes, because those protein sources come with saturated fat and cholesterol, and then a lot of other compounds that have been accumulated in the animal's flesh from everything they ate. So there's a lot of money in protein, but when it comes down to it, most people don't need more than 10 to 15% of their calories from protein. So thinking about like 0.08 grams per kilogram of healthy body weight is sufficient. And we also have protein that comes into our system through the sloughing off of the lining of our GI tract. So we recycle like 90 grams of protein a day that's available for our body to make new compounds. So the emphasis on protein is pretty commercialized.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last 2 things are, the one is about aluminum foil. Somebody asked a couple of times.
Okay. Aluminum foil. So aluminum is one of those compounds that's a heavy metal that we have no dietary need for, but we find it often, I think almost always, in the plaques of Alzheimer's. So we want to try to eliminate sources of dietary aluminum. One is baking powder. You want to make sure that you're choosing aluminum-free baking powder. And typically it's right next to the regular baking powder. And then if you're using aluminum for cooking, you want to make sure it's not directly touching the food, especially if it's something acidic like tomato. So if you had, let's say, a lasagna, you would want to make sure that you did not, or like a ratatouille, you wouldn't want the aluminum foil to touch. So that's where parchment paper would come in. So you could put parchment paper, and then if you want to put the aluminum to seal it, you know, kind of to make the seal, that's fine. But you don't want to use aluminum foil touching the vegetables, ideally. And things stick to aluminum. You're going to end up, everything just makes a mess. Where parchment, things don't stick as readily to parchment paper, and that's the gold in there. And then did you have one more question?
Yeah, the last one is, we can just take it as question come feedback. So it says, will you teach us more about specialized diet for GERD or diabetes or blood pressure, things like that?
Yes.
And the last thing I will say, that the South Asian diet comprises, the cooking starts with little bit oil and popping mustard seeds into that. So if you give some insight on how to bypass that and then make a healthy meal, that might be another workshop.
Yeah, we can talk about that at another time. But I know the toasting to bloom the flavors, you know, and the popping of those seeds is very important for flavor wise. And I think that in most cases, the oil is just something that you were taught how to do it. When I learned how to make Italian pasta sauce, we always started with oil. That's how I learned oil, and then the onion, and then the garlic. But now I make it without. So we can talk about that going forward, but we need more feedback as far as what types of ideas. And I have so much. I have pages and pages of notes that I wrote out that I wanted to be able to communicate to you during the larger sessions, because we'll be able to really focus on accessing those smart shopping lists. I want to do it where you have printables, you know, handouts that you can take home, and so much more to come. But yes.
And one more, I know we are behind. So one more is about the cooking. So either baking, roasting, sauteing, and steaming. So what's the nutrition loss in these heating process, and how much the oven temperature should be to keep the maximum nutrition into that?
So it depends on the fruit or vegetable. They're going to have different losses, and it depends on how long you're cooking and how long you're roasting or baking. The wet cooking methods tend to be the best options, especially if you are using the liquid. So if you're steaming broccoli, that's excellent. If you are boiling broccoli, you only lose about 14%, right, of the antioxidant power. So what does that mean? Eat one more piece of broccoli. So it's really, I think sometimes people worry too much about, am I losing, you know, too much of the nutrients? But if you're using the whole foods and you're not adding a lot of other condiments that are going to add a lot of salt and sugar, and you're not peeling, you know, you're really trying to use in the whole form, then you're going to be in good shape. And like we did here, you can use it in a variety of ways. So we could have baked some of this cabbage and added that cooked and fresh. So that's a takeaway. I want you to think, if you're going to eat something cooked, make sure you have something raw, and you know, to balance that out, because you are going to have different properties. And even like we said, powdered garlic versus fresh versus roasted, use it all. Then you get all of the benefits. But the wet cooking methods, and we'll get into more of that in our big class.
That is correct, Timaree. Timaree, on behalf of all of us at the Crack the Wellness Code of ICC, we really want to thank you. This was such a marathon session full of content, practices. I mean, starting from sourcing to storing to shopping, cooking, and dietary practices. You covered everything. Of course, we are looking at more nuggets of useful information coming through the micro-learning packages that are coming out. My thanks to the panelists, Veena Uttarwar and Gayatri Shanbag, both of them, posing some very, very insightful questions and being with us this morning on a Sunday. And all of you, the participants, I mean, thanks for being with us for these 94 sessions, since COVID.